Welcome to another edition of VLGA Connect. It is Reconciliation Week, and we thought we might touch on some related topics in our interview today with Marcus Holmes, who is with the law firm Land Equity Legal, based in Western Australia, but has worked quite a lot with the VLGA over the years. Marcus, great to see you and welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be here.
Marcus, you do a lot of work with local government and provide advice on engaging around Aboriginal corporations, traditional owners, and those sorts of issues. Give us a little bit of a snapshot of the work that you do in the space that you're in.
Sure. It's interesting because local government under native title legislation and related sort of legislation is not front and centre mentioned in the statutes, and yet there's major impacts, both positive and negative, I guess, that can arise for local government in engaging with Aboriginal people. And I guess my focus is very much on the positive side of it. I think in Victoria in particular, there's quite an array of laws that local government needs to get on top of. Your human rights legislation, obviously your new Local Government Act brings the Aboriginal community, including traditional owners, front and centre into who must be consulted as members of the municipal community. And that's quite well ahead of a lot of other states and territories in terms of a proactive role for local government in that space.
I was going to ask you that very question, Marcus, if you don't mind, because there has been, it seems, a definite renewal of focus on traditional owner engagement in Victoria, particularly from state government. So you're saying that we are ahead of other states in that space?
Look, I think you are, and the obviously treaty is something that's very much coming towards making some moves towards what's going to be in a treaty. The current First Peoples Assembly is currently debating whether there's going to be, a single statewide treaty or several treaties. I think, although again local government is not formally a party to any treaty negotiations as yet, under your treaty legislation it can be. And I guess my view, having worked quite closely with West Australian local governments who are engaging outside the formal sort of negotiation process on some major regional agreements, which some people are regarding as similar to being treaties, the Noongar Native Title Settlement, for example, very similar in size to the state of Victoria. 30,000 Noongar Aboriginal people are going to be the beneficiaries of that settlement. And it's broken into regions. So although it's a single package, it's broken into 6 geographic regions, and 6 different Aboriginal corporations are going to be managing the benefits and land access and so on. Local government over here is finding it's a bit behind. Now that settlement is fairly close to actually being rolled out, local government, I guess, is a bit concerned that it hasn't formally been at the table. There's going to be quite a few implications, and I think the same probably applies for Victorian local government. And I know that when we did, the VLGA did its March forum last year regarding treaty, where the Honourable Natalie Hutchins was on the panel, but also Jill Gallagher who was then the Treaty Advancement Commissioner. She said something very interesting about local government, which was that local government needs to take a proactive role in treaty, and it needs to get involved early. And certainly my work in, I guess, quasi-treaties in Western Australia would bear that out. So, yeah, I think the same applies in Victoria.
Are you seeing local government taking a more active role with regard to treaty, either in Victoria or in Western Australia, where you do your work? Is that following through, I guess, is my question?
Yeah, look, I think with Victoria, certainly the VLGA is keen to be involved in debate and have perhaps a conduit role as to how a treaty or treaties might play out for local government in Victoria. In Western Australia, I'm getting quite a lot of work from councils who are now realising that there's going to be impacts. For example, there's going to be Crown land access licences. There's various grants of land going to Aboriginal corporations, which is great. But some of that land, local government is responsible for, and there's various resourcing and risk issues that may arise around that. I think Victorian local government is very well placed to engage with treaty, whether that's formally or informally. The reconciliation action plans that local councils have, the collaborative approach that they have to have under the new legislation, but which they have anyway. I think all of those are good grounding for some positive engagement with treaty in Victoria.
Marcus, how has your work been impacted by COVID-19? What are you seeing in relation to these traditional owner groups and Aboriginal corporations?
Oh, look, I think things are, certainly in Western Australia, things are carrying on, albeit at a safer and slower pace. Our regional communities are still very much locked away, and entering into those communities and leaving them has very strict rules around it, as is right and proper, given the vulnerability of particularly Aboriginal elders to COVID. The Native Title Tribunal has slowed down its activity around negotiation with mining companies and other proponents. Boards of corporations are getting used to Zoom. I think we're all finding Zoom has a sort of artificiality about it, which I know that you can go through a 2-hour Zoom meeting and it's like a whole day's face-to-face meeting in terms of how tired you are afterwards, which is a strange phenomenon. And but I think their main concern, and native title corporations have had a bit of a leadership role, is getting supplies, medical supplies and food out to remote communities. So supermarket chains, trucking companies, state agencies and Aboriginal corporations have all been working very well in dealing with COVID and making sure the vulnerable are looked after as best they can be, so that's good.
I imagine you see a fair bit of the work that councils do in developing and implementing their reconciliation action plans, and I wonder what observations you have on how far we've come in terms of the meaningfulness of that work in recent years.
Look, I think, wearing my lawyer's hat, I think there's opportunities are missed in quite a few reconciliation action plans. A lot of them, while they're very important about engaging with the local Aboriginal community, they overlook the opportunity to engage more formally around perhaps agreement making, cultural heritage management in the local council area, developing Aboriginal heritage management plans, those kinds of things. So bringing, I guess, some of the statutory obligations that councils have into a reconciliation action plan and turning it more into a legal document. I think that is a bias of mine, I suppose, as a lawyer, that I think that those documents can be quite useful as a kind of risk management and planning tool. So I think probably you might see with treaty rolling out in Victoria in the coming years, reconciliation action plans may actually become an informal way of engaging with treaty. If there isn't some statewide engagement by local government in treaty, I think reconciliation action plans at their best can be a very good alternative forum for that kind of engagement.
Marcus, perhaps a final question, and it's a bit without notice. Wearing another hat of mine, I'm aware of some pockets around the state where it's difficult for authorities to engage with traditional owners because there's no agreement in those pockets on who the official traditional owners are, I guess. I'm wondering how common that is and what sort of advice you have for those people that are in that situation?
Look, it is quite common across Australia. Generally, the groups that have native title are often first in line to be consulted, and that's the case in Victoria. I know you've got a consultation paper out at the moment regarding this very issue. You know, a lot of councils in and around Melbourne, for example, there are gaps where there are no registered Aboriginal parties under your Aboriginal heritage legislation. So who do you consult? And I think sometimes the best course of action is to speak to heritage professionals, archaeologists and anthropologists, about who are the right people to speak for country. Local government, in my experience, is often well ahead of mining companies or state agencies about who's who and who does need to be consulted. I guess consulting as broadly as possible is always a sensible approach, rather than having a sort of narrow group of favourites that can sometimes come unstuck. But it's going to be interesting to see how councils and others respond to this consultation paper about filling, I guess, the pieces of the heritage jigsaw that are missing in Victoria. But yeah, as I said, the formal people that you tend to negotiate with, because they have rights under the Native Title Act, for example, are the native title holder groups and their corporations.
I understand you've prepared a discussion paper on some of these issues, and we're hopeful that in the not too distant future we might see you in Victoria being able to speak more about that topic.
No, that would be great. And it also looking at whether there's some kind of memorandum of understanding for Victorian local government and the state around engagement in treaties. So I'd love to have a discussion with councils about whether that's of interest.
Terrific. Marcus, that's been great to get your insights into that. Really appreciate your time. You are over there in Western Australia and coping well, I hope, in COVID-19, and I hope it's not too long before you can move more freely around the country speaking on these issues.
Thank you, Chris. No, thank you for having me this afternoon.
That wraps up another episode of VLGA Connect. If you'd like to be part of future episodes, or if you have a story to share that might make for a future episode, we'd love to hear about it. Send us an email to vlga@vlga.org.au. See you again soon on VLGA Connect.